joins us right now. Congressman, are you pleased with the rollout of easing some of the restrictions that the governor has put in place? Not nearly as onerous as those in other states, but still a sort of a slow but steady process.
Absolutely. I think he's doing the right thing. It's time to phase in our economic recovery and reopen for business. We have to be measured and responsible. We have to defer to local leadership. We have to defer to the conditions on the ground. All of these principles are in the governor's plan. I mean, just to keep things in perspective, Neil, if you take all the cases in Texas throughout all 254 counties, we're still just a quarter of the cases in New York City. So I think as we see the curve flatten, we'll see some spikes. We'll see some flare-ups. But that's part of managing risk. What we have to make sure that we don't see and that we might need to re-engage and intervene is if you have an inundation to the health system in some pocket or corner of the state. But as long as there's capacity there in terms of bed space and critical equipment, I think this is absolutely what's needed, or we're going to face longer-term, bigger problems, not just as a state, but as a country. And that's why I'm glad Texas is more of a self-reliant, not government-reliant state. And I think that psyche, that attitude, coupled with being safe and responsible, is going to have Texas, in my opinion, leading the way for the recovery of this country.
Having said that about Texan self-reliance and all of that, how do you feel, Congressman, about all the states that are clamoring for more federal aid? I believe Governor Murphy of New Jersey telling the president, first time I heard a figure that he's, pegged to getting more aid from Washington, $20 to $30 billion. Are you open to state aid, or would you put caveats on it the way Mitch McConnell has hinted that there should be some sort of liability protection for businesses once you do fully reopen?
Well, I'm certainly not interested in bailing out states that have mismanaged their governments at the state or local level, quite frankly, and that's across the board. I think that would be a moral hazard that we would create, a precedent that we would regret. We may need to provide some assistance, but it should always be, and by the way, we have provided as a federal government almost $750 billion in support to date. But whatever we do, we have to have a shared risk, shared responsibility, shared cost approach, or we don't provide, or rather we provide a perverse incentive for states not to reengage, not to manage risk and reopen. And I think that would be a problem.
So when you look at all the money that has been spent, we're at $3 trillion. If you add all the congressional stimulus measures coordinated with the president, I'm leaving out the trillions more the Federal Reserve has used to sort of backstop banks and businesses and provide loans of last resort and cash, just liquidity for the banking system. How is that ever going to be paid back, you think?
Neil, I'm glad you asked that question. I hope we talk about that more and more, because we were already in a tenuous fiscal situation with $23 trillion in debt prior to the COVID crisis. Now we're adding trillions. That's, we've seen the highest deficit spending, now almost $4 trillion in 1 year, the highest we've ever seen since World War II. And now in less than 2 years, we're going to have the highest debt load as a nation that we've ever had, about 108% debt to GDP, which is higher than World War II. So we might be able to manage through, and I believe we will, the crisis of COVID and the sort of economic impact in the near term and intermediate. But the long-term fiscal crisis that's looming is real. Someone's going to have to pay for this. And I'm talking to a lot of members about making sure we have provisions to offset things, to put budget debt to deficit targets, to walk this thing back in a glide slope, to put other measures that force Congress to do what we don't do, because we keep kicking the can down the road. We blow through our budget caps. We've got to put measures in place that force Congress to do what every state and every family is having to do and has always had to do, and that's act responsibly with their resources.
All right, we'll watch it closely. Congressman Arrington, very good catching up with you. Be safe, be healthy, be well.